We are.
Start over. We're recording.
Yes.
All right. Okay, heard. We're doing roll call. Unmuted this time.
Here.
Cool. Joel?
I'm here.
There we go. Okay. One absent.
We have a quorum. Okay, item 3 is the chairman's remarks. I do not have any this morning. Item 4, public comment.
Record of attendance from Chief Preston Lyle Woodridge.
All right, item 5, consent items. The approval of the minutes from the ETSB Policy Advisory Committee meeting on Monday, July 21st, 2021. Can I get a motion to place that on file, please?
So moved, Karen.
Second. Dinah. Okay,
Here we go. Aaron?
Yes.
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Dinah?
yes.
Hayden?
Yes.
Okay.
Item 5B, the radio maintainer report. Everybody got an opportunity to read it. Matt is not attending this morning. He's on vacation, but
John Mozar's here if you have any questions.
okay, John Mozar's online. So does anyone have any questions about the radio maintainer report? If not, can I get a motion to place that on file?
So moved, Karen. Second, Dinah.
This is great this morning.
There we
It's
go.
gonna be easy. Yeah.
Just pointing, point click. Aaron?
Yes.
Bird?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Carmen? Dinah?
Yes.
Hayden?
Yes.
Okay.
Item 6A, Dieter's radio airtime requests.
Just so quickly, you previously approved airtime additions for Glen Ellen Volunteer Fire Company and 20 radios. They're going 21, so we just have to make it a matter of record and bring it up to the board.
Okay.
Plus one, right? Yeah.
So,
Yes, requires action.
okay, motion to approve one additional radio for Glen Ellen Fire.
Recommendation to approve.
Recommendation.
I'll make a motion to approve. I'll second.
Thank
Trying
you.
to confuse me now again. Okay.
Expire.
Dinah,
Yes.
Hayden,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Bird,
Yes.
Joel,
Yes.
go ahead.
Okay, item 7, Dieter's portable and mobile radio replacement. This is basically the meat of our meeting. So I think we're doing very well. In fact, I think that we can send a preliminary report to the ETSB board. Very preliminary. I know that fire wants to wait for a certifying lab. Correct. So that's going to take some time. But go ahead.
A certified lab on the new radio or on the batteries?
The new radio.
New radio, yes.
That would be the NFPA 1802 compliance.
Right.
But what I'd like to do is talk about the models this morning. In fact, I have a couple items. The models, if we can settle on the models this morning, I think we're actually there.
We've never seen the next. So I couldn't say anything on the next. The other ones I'm kind of familiar with, just out of the Motorola stockpile. But that's the only thing that I would have a hard time with. So far, the feedback I've gotten on the next from other chiefs that have seen it has been neutral to negative, I would say. It's heavy, bulky, and the screen. Every time they pull the screen, they pretend it's their cell phone and it changes channels. So I've heard that from 3 chiefs that have had it so far. So without having it myself, I don't know if that's accurate.
Okay, was that the primary radio that was going to be used the next?
The other option would be the 6,000 if you're staying Motorola.
I think, but I've talked to John and Matt and some of the other, I think Motorola, the equipment that has been purchased for all the maintainer has been Motorola driven. And I think that's a huge investment that's in it. I think going to the 256 encryption changes the ball field a little bit, allows a little bit more latitude to other models if that's the case down the line. So I don't see a reason why you wouldn't want to stay with the Motorola product. My comment is not negative on the Next. I just haven't seen it, so I can't verify that what they say is or isn't appropriate or accurate in my mind. But the other radios, the 7,000 or the 8,000s, the 6, and of course the 4, which we'll look at soon, seem to be that standard field ruggedized radio that we'd want for our guys and gals that work out there.
So would if we have numbers.
I'm not using them, I don't care.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I think the Next has cellular, so it has other
It's
options.
LTE, right?
LTE.
Yeah.
I mean, we're using LTE on our body cams. I understand how it works. It works. It's relatively robust when it comes to it. So I see that there's an obvious need for it. It's just a couple that I've talked to have had. I've had some that are saying it's cool because it looks like a cell phone, but the ones that have been semi-critical have said that there's some inherent things that they've seen with it being bulky, which seems odd, but heavy.
It's shorter and stockier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the screen, when they get it out, they treat it like their cell phone, is that they go to click it, and as soon as they do, they change channels. So I'm sure that's a setting that John would be working with, whoever the maintainer is would be working with. But it would be difficult for me to give any feedback on it without seeing it.
John Lozar, you have a comment about that?
That is one of the issues that I noticed on the Apex Next is the screen. It turns on like a Chief Aaron indicated, it turns on like a cell phone. I did talk with Motorola about if there was any settings that were available to turn that off. And at this point, there are no settings that are available. I do know that on the case that comes with the police version, there is like a little ridged area when the radio recesses into the holder where it turns the screen off. Whereas on the fire radio, there is no ridge, so that screen is on continuously until it times out. So that is one of the things that I've noticed with the Next radio.
And what does that do for battery life? Do you know, John?
Well, obviously, the longer the screen is on, it'll affect the battery life. Yes.
All right. Was the Next radio the radio that we were considering purchasing for law enforcement and fire?
So I could answer that on behalf of fire. So the APX Next radio is the model that the NFPA 1802 compliant radio will be modeled off of.
Okay.
So we really don't know exactly what that 1802 radio is going to look like, but it looks similar to the APX Next, but it won't. The model's not the 8,000 or the 7,000. It is the APX Next. And from fire, the biggest concern that everybody had was the screen. Not so much that they couldn't turn it off, but if it was going to break. But I'm sure that will get shaken out during the 1802 testing, because it has to be very ruggedized to pass that test.
Okay. John, how about for law enforcement?
Well, again, on the law enforcement side, I think as Linda indicated, the radio is a little bit shorter, stockier, so its center of mass is a little different than on the typical 7,000s, 8,000s. So it gives the appearance of it to be heavier. But when we looked at it here, comparing it to a 7,000, it's about the same weight. It's just the center of mass is a little different on it. Otherwise, I didn't see any other issues with the Apex Next for law enforcement except for the screen.
Okay.
And we only have 2 of those, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there any opportunity to get more than 2 to get them around faster?
What?
At the Next for law enforcement? I know you said you just got 2 for fire. Is there any? Because I don't know where they're at. I'm assuming you do
We have 4 now, correct?
What was that, Brandon?
We have 4 now, correct?
Yeah, there are 4.
Oh, 4? No idea.
Okay.
Where are they? Do we know?
So all of ACDC's agencies have had a chance to take a look at them. my feedback has been mostly positive. They are smaller, but they like the smaller antenna. They like the ability to the voice command to to change channels and talk groups. So Wooddale just wanted to test them because they got a bunch of new headsets from Merit. They wanted to make sure the new headsets worked, and they did. So I have the other two that Wooddale wanted to test, and they're done. So I'm ready to pass them on.
I mean,
Okay,
So they're getting around.
all right. Well, can we do this? Okay, there are a couple issues with the next that we're looking at, that may be an issue, but as long as that is the primary radio that we're looking to purchase for law enforcement and fire, and we have the numbers, can we at least put that in a preliminary report so ETSB can start looking at finance?
So I think, so a couple things. One is, I would say that one thing to think about as you make a choice in a portable is, if it's Apex next is their next thing, no pun intended, then chances are you're going to see the 6,000s and the 8,000s, you're going to get end of life. And so if we want to get 10 years out of a radio, that would be the only thing that would make me nervous about going to a 6,000 on the police side. Is it's going to be done sooner than the next. But I mean, obviously there's other things to consider. I think on the preliminary report, the questions you want to get to the board for approval is the number of radios. And I think that part they can weigh in on, right? Because fire's going to have significantly more or a different configuration, not necessarily more, because I was looking at the numbers and it doesn't necessarily feel like more, although there's a few agencies that are a little bit larger that need to weigh in yet. But that number and going in that rollout, as opposed to by vehicle position, so portable for everybody, and then whether or not they want to go down the line into part-time or look at those numbers, that's the part the board has to decide. Because once they decide that, then when you decide the model, then financially you can start working on it. It's still on a state contract, so we have basic numbers.
to the chairman's point, though, the Next is probably the most expensive radio. So if we use that as the model, no matter what, that would be worst case scenario. Am I close to correct?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we'd be talking battery banks, we'd be talking either public safety mics or remote safety, whatever, whichever microphone. I'm assuming it has all the same features. So it has the curled cords, it has the antenna cable, the antenna cord to public safety mics, but a different battery.
Of course.
Yes, because I think it's backwards. If I'm not mistaken, the connectors on the other side. It just makes it a little bit different. Right. So that would be worst case. So that probably wouldn't be bad to go through. Like if you're looking for numbers to put it forward.
I mean, I can give them the ballpark's 25 million plus or minus. I just needed to adjust the fire numbers, and when I get those, then I'll have an idea if we're going to be over that number. But.
And how far are we? You're good. I think we're good with us, if I remember. How far do you think on fire?
The only question I had on police, go ahead, but I do have a question on police when you.
Yeah, so I'll reach out to those towns personally today, each one, to make sure they get their survey filled out.
If you need some help, let me know.
Okay. And this is just fire, correct? That list you gave me? That's just fire?
The police is done.
So it's 7 towns. So I should be able to. Thank you for that.
One's right here.
Before you leave. Okay.
The
And,
question I had on police, you guys did a radios in like mobiles.
Yes.
Is that a recommendation? Because they haven't, the last time we did it, they didn't do, if you did mobiles, they were purchased by the agency.
Correct.
So
So we've got about 125 vehicles, radios in vehicles, detective cars, administrative car, for some, your first line, like in mine, my supervisor car has them. They're all probably going to be end of life as well. And if we're changing either technology or we're adding or modifying something, is that something that we should be considering? And I think at this point, based on the uses that we've had with it, I would recommend it, just simply because we've kind of enthralled that into our culture. I'm sure the law enforcement, I'm only looking to you because you're the only one, law
Right.
enforcement. I can't talk
I
to
get
fire because they have it. We model ourselves after fire. You guys do it, and then we figure it out about
We're
5
smarter
years
than we
later that you did the right thing. So that's what I've been doing, is kind of moving into that for some of my key vehicles.
See, we didn't do any from the
Okay.
beginning, just for the command post.
Yeah.
So it's
okay.
not part of our culture, so we're not gonna do it. Detective cars, I believe there's a mobile in the sergeant's car.
Mhm. Yeah, that's what we use, sergeant's car. We only have 4.
Okay.
Some have 28.
Right.
28.
Yeah, there's a couple that are pretty high with it.
Pearl Stream, 28. Glendale Heights, 28. Sheriff's got 20. I mean, the percentage of sheriff, given
Yeah,
the
I
size
mean,
of
it's
sheriff
probably
isn't as,
pretty close.
the other two look like it's everybody, every vehicle, right?
And then maybe if you look at it, maybe the concept of it is more towards your first responder for that command post. So you have a command post, I have a supervisor car, right? I
Yeah.
don't have it. I'm gonna have a OIC car. And maybe that's the goal of it, is to drill it towards a specific brand of car.
So we
I
did,
used this the other day. It's a truck, what's a command post? What is a watch commander's car, rather than whatever? And maybe you focus it towards that car for those style cars. And maybe that's a compromise. But I think they're all the 6500s. John, am I right?
There's a couple different
Okay.
varieties out there.
But just to bring them
Roselle,
along.
in Roselle, they're all 6500s, which is a current model.
Yeah, so we could look at, the question would be replacing them as they end of life versus, or when you buy a new vehicle, then you put in a new one kind of thing.
Right. Well, the other side too is what software do we have to upgrade on them? And if we're in the latest model, then we just have to upgrade the software. It may be different, but I think there's a style vehicle that I'm kind of looking at is a command vehicle. So whether it's in a command post, incident command post, watch commander's car, it almost seems to be a necessity to have that because of either multi-frequencies or whatever policy we devise for dispatch.
That would be my next question, was if the mobile would be dual band VHF? Because you don't have a UHF and 800's already on there, right?
Right.
So if you're gonna put a mobile in, would you want it to be dual band?
Oh, we've got
On the
priority.
police side, I know the answer over
Yeah.
here.
It probably wouldn't be it wouldn't be bad, because then we would have the redundancy of talking with Fireground. So we have that ability then to cross over. And then a radio is a radio, right? So it doesn't have to be a fire radio or a police radio, it's just a radio, and that would be the culture then, which I think could be good, VHF. Cool.
so do you want us to contact the law enforcement agencies that have large numbers of mobiles and find out, okay, how many command vehicles do you use? You know, your sergeants or command
Well,
posts.
I mean, that's up to you guys. I
I think
mean,
that's
whatever your
probably not a
recommendation's
bad
gonna be.
idea. I can reach out to Chief Homer and see if he can follow up with that.
Okay.
Like I say, the sheriff department, that's probably how many command vehicles
might,
are out there.
yeah.
I mean, with the
And
enough number of
detectives
cars.
and everything else, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's really, it looks like Glendale Heights has 28 vehicles, 28 mobiles. Carroll Stream has 28 vehicles, or 44 vehicles, 28 mobiles, thank you. Yeah. The rest are, like you said, one-offs. So if the policy is command vehicles, and if they want to replace them, they would do that on their own. I don't, I mean, whatever you're, I mean, if you're gonna
Right.
make a recommendation.
Let me break down the car styles. And then we can figure it out, because we have 2 in administrative cars, detective and patrol. So
Okay.
let me figure that out and we can get back to it. Then the other question is, I'm gonna come right back at you and say merit as an example. If they get vehicles, is that something that we would be looking at to encompass them as well?
I think so, because it's countywide, and it's a countywide benefit to everybody.
Because I think they're talking about 4 or 5 vehicles. That's how much money is raised.
I mean, we had a couple of spares, I think we threw one in there, and then What we don't have in here is OEM,
Right.
and they got that state vehicle, and we had an extra mobile, so we threw that in there.
Because Leah's just
I
trying,
mean, it's a 10-year-old mobile that's been sitting in a box. I'm like, here we go. So-
Chairman, a couple comments on the mobiles.
Go ahead, Jim.
Just back to Chief Herron's point, something else to consider is some police agencies I'm aware of currently have their own VHF radios in cars. So they've got Starcom portables and VHF mobiles. So, just FYI, when you're doing surveys, they may not have said anything about a Starcom mobile, which they don't have, but they probably do have VHF mobiles already. So, they're going to find a mix out there just for any survey questions you might put together. Second thing on mobiles, for the fire survey or for the fire recommendation, my assumption, and again, it was assumption, not a statement, was that we were going to keep all existing Starcom VHF mobiles in service, and that the number shown in the report is just the additional mobiles to have one per fire vehicle. So I think that's, I know we kind of glossed over it, but is that the operating assumption, that all existing mobiles would remain in service and they would need to be upgraded with TDMA and encryption?
Good question. Does anybody have that answer?
Wait, or
John Moser?
yeah, John Lozar.
The only comment I have is that the 7,500 mobiles will be end of life at the end of 23.
Any idea how many of those?
Well, all of the 7,500s that are out there.
I think we have 320 mobiles currently. How many are those? How many do we have of those, John?
I think you're right. It's somewhere between 300 and 400 mobiles. I'd have
Yeah,
to
but
look.
how many of those are 7,500s?
A majority of them. So I would say at least 90-some% of them are 7,500s.
So John, I appreciate the point there at end of life, but as you know, I mean, the mobiles are pretty stable and pretty rugged. Going back to Linda's prior point was, assuming you could upgrade them, those things are pretty rock solid. They're gonna last unless Motorola just says that radio is incompatible with our system, which I doubt would be the case for a long time. Again, I asked the question, is the plan to keep those in service, which I don't see a pressing reason to replace them unless they just were not serviceable for some reason.
From a maintainer's perspective, if we're going to be doing firmware updates on all of the radios, then we may not be able to get the firmware for the 7,500s. So we would not be able to keep those radios up to date.
And what's the implication of that, John?
Well, there's several implications from CPS to any kind of features or any kind of bugs that the radios may have, as Motorola is constantly improving the radios. So if they're not going to be supporting them at the end of 23, then there may be some other issues that come up, with TDMA that will not be addressed by any future updates if the radios are not supported.
Okay, so I guess we need some direction, because the numbers are going to change drastically if we say we're replacing mobiles.
I just add 325 to the list.
John
Plus or
Lozar.
minus, really.
Split between fire and police, correct?
John Lozar, are all the radios 256 upgradable encryption wise?
No, none of the 7,500s can do the 256.
Kind of answers that rollout too, but I think we talked that too being a year or 2 years down the line, right? Being kind of phased in, but as soon as the main police channel goes to encryption, then we've lost any communications with fire.
On their mobiles.
On their mobiles. On the portables you'd have it, but on the mobiles you wouldn't. And when you guys are responding, generally you're using the mobile as the response mechanism, right? So you're getting updates, you're using that mobile radio for that. Right, we didn't use the portable until we arrive on the scene. Right, typically. Or in the station, right? I mean, yeah. So I think that's kind of a critical step on the encryption. I would agree.
Okay. All
We just
right.
have certain vehicles respond to calls.
So then we should change the report to assume all mobiles are being replaced and change the numbers accordingly. Is that the conclusion?
That's what it sounds like.
Thinking. Except for the 6500s. So I think we got to figure out how many 6500s are out there. That'll buy us some breathing room.
I would guess there's very few on the fire side. John should know better, but I mean, most of the original mobiles came with the original portables.
And John, are you able to figure out who's got which model?
Yes, I have an inventory list of that. And as far as the 6500s, we need to double check with Motorola to make sure that the current 6500s in service can be upgraded with AES.
Because the end user would have to.
Right, yeah.
Just saying.
Getting back to models and numbers. Do we have enough right now to send a preliminary report to board? So we can start working on finances.
I think we can get the police updated mobile numbers to you relatively quickly.
So the question is, they meet on Wednesday.
Oh, I won't have it by Wednesday.
So I think if you give an update and we're ready for August,
Okay.
I think, it is what it is. I mean, because now we, as we find more information, it can either be accurate or even be report. So, I mean, that's the big thing. So I would say keep pushing, and then we can tune up these, because you don't have the encryption piece from Matt Harmon yet for this preliminary report. So there's a couple pieces missing. So you can keep working on the body of this document and updating. The other question I would have is thoughts on existing 8000s. How many 8000s do we have in the system now, John?
We probably have on the police side 8000s. I'll have to confirm this number, but I think there's about 10 of them out there. There's more 6000s out there. On the fire side, there's about 20 8000 XEs.
There's more than that, because isn't Glen Ellen is going to have 21, and you bought 17 for the hazmat radios, and then whatever we had in the prior to that. So we've replaced probably about a dozen that,
We replaced 17 radios, and there was 3 additional purchases, and I was not counting the Glen Ellens because they're not programmed yet.
And I'll buy some time to evaluate the next on our side too. To give us a little bit of time, and we can figure out where they're at, try to push them through some of the GCOM agencies.
Okay. For the August report.
I think, then we'll write up something for you on a status report for the meeting.
August was our target anyways.
Yeah, July, August. But I think, this is moving along rapidly considering last one. So I think we're well ahead of the game.
Much better.
And it becomes complicated because at the end of the life, I think the NFP standard answers the choice unless there's some huge issue. What we should be doing on the fire side too is writing down those issues so it can go to, and even on the police side, so it can go to product development and Motorola on those things. Because that radio you're looking at is the one they're going to certify.
Yeah, and I do have a
So-
list of concerns that people have
Yeah,
voiced.
so we should get those to most.
Mostly focused around the school. But the positives about waiting for the new, whatever model that's going to be, whether it's the next, the 1802 compliant model, is it's going to be, we talked about earlier, it's going to be the newest technology, it's going to last longer, and it's going to be the NFPA 1802 compliant, which what's nice about 1802 is not only is it compliant for the radio, but all the accessories, the mic and the cable, which there's been some firefighter fatalities based on the cable and the microphones. So by waiting for that, we're going to get a safer radio. Now, there's a couple downsides. So the battery issues with the intrinsically safe batteries that we're working through, and then the new radios don't match the current chargers that we have. So the battery chargers are different, so those will have to be replaced as well.
more money.
So the police are gonna be 7, 8, 900 only. And fire is gonna be on the next, but theory, if they stay with the next, if it's certified, it would be 7, 8, 9 and VHF. And plus GPS, I'm assuming.
Technically, it's an all band radio, but you can put whatever you want in it.
So both sides are all band?
Say that again.
Police and fire, the radio is the radio. You don't buy it just 7, 8, 900, you buy all band.
The radios come standard from the factory, all band, which is VHF, UHF, 7 and 800, and then you delete the band that you do not want.
So if police just go with the 7, 800 and it's a single band,
Right.
that's cheaper. The fire will have to have VHF and 800, 700, 800. So we save money by having a single band on the police side.
Can you have, and again, this goes to Mike Reed, can you then have a radio specifically, someone that is a arson investigator as an example? Can I have that specific radio, VHF added to that radio only? Or is it all or nothing?
I'm sure we can.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, it's to John's point, it's a checkbox in the programming,
but,
which is why I never want to pay a lot of money for something that's already in the radio.
but I think in the current, and John, I'll ask you this question, in the current software, when you do a checkbox, it's for everything in that group. It's not for a radio, but it's everything. So it'd be all the Roselle radios, where I may only want 1 or 2 arson radios charged up with that. Am I right? Or do
It's a
you?
Probably be a different code plug for fire task force people. Yeah.
It's a separate code plug for each variant that you have. And by the way, list price, each band is about $800. So if you delete 2 bands, that's $1,600 list.
And the antenna size on them? Big, that's big for law
Still
enforcement.
stubby.
All one size now.
All one side, okay.
John, is that's not correct, right? Are you saying the police ones are all one size?
Yes.
Yeah,
And
but
same thing with the fire. If the fire on the next is VU and 800, it's all one antenna.
the fire antenna was longer than the 800 only band antenna, right?
If you plan to purchase an antenna that's not stock, you could maybe get a shorter antenna, yes.
Sorry, that wasn't my question. And I'm just trying to remember, I only saw the police ones briefly and the fire ones briefly, but isn't the combined VHF 800 antenna on a fire radio longer than a 800 only antenna on a police radio, or am I mistaken?
On the next, as I recall, they're all the same size because they're all one band, or they're one antenna for all bands.
Can't we do
Whereas
that?
on the 7000s, they were different sizes. They were
Okay.
long on the 7000 because of the VHF.
All right, maybe I'm thinking of the other radios then. Thanks for the clarification, John. Lynn, I've got another question when you guys are ready.
Go ahead, Jim.
So we've kind of talked about the core of, sworn police officers and, fires sort of on the cusp of defining, full-time, part-time and all that. But then there's kind of all these other ancillary users we've identified, and we have them in the fire survey. And I think the police have done it for CSOs and records and others. How do we plan to address that part of it? So we've got fire prevention people that respond to emergencies. We have emergency management people that respond to emergencies. Some are full-time, some are part-time. Police have CSOs. Where does that show up in this report? And what's our position on that? Are we recommending any radios for them? Not recommending radios?
I think we want the radios, but I don't know if we can do it again.
Well, I think that it's not that many more, but you're starting to creep up in the dollar amount. The 7000s are serviceable. You can get batteries for those. So we should be using those as the CAF radios, as spare radios, and then because they have depreciated to 0, they can be asset transferred to agencies for those people. And then as they die I think we, you know, if we've succeeded in categorizing them as first responders, then we, well, and you know, then we change it out. You know, you've got a brand new radio, you get a brand new radio, we get to the point of the 7,000s, we don't have any extra, then we start replacing, giving, you know, first line people and shoving them back like we're doing right now. I mean, they're certainly serviceable. It's the XEs that are going to be no good to us with the batteries in terms of, you know, they can suffer through this nuance of intrinsically and intrinsically, but not intrinsically together till we replace them. But we wouldn't want to keep those in service. And then the question would be, you want to give, you know, and this is what gives me heartburn. Glen Ellen's buying 21 radios, 8,000s, even though we're in this process. Do we give all those people brand new radios, and what happens to those 8,000 XEs? Because they're brand new. So should we be replacing those, or do they stay in? Because 8,000s, those batteries are intrinsically safe, so they're certainly serviceable.
John, excuse me for a second. John, can you comment on that 8,000 radio with the intrinsically safe rating?
The 8,000s are not intrinsically safe. The batteries are not intrinsically safe. They are non-incentive, which is a step below intrinsically safe.
Thank you.
And the APX Next comes either way, as I recall, or APX Next is only non-incentive?
No, the APX Next is also non-incentive.
So a step down, but I think to Chief Dinah's point, I mean, I think we need to all understand, you know, we're not necessarily getting the same level that we had. And I think there's kind of recognition out there that maybe there's need to be education out there, as I mentioned in the last meeting, of, you know, sort of what you have today, you know, essentially downgrading existing radio today could take you to no rating, but I think where we're landing is essentially at non-incentive as the minimum standard, I think is where we're at. But Chief Dinah, jump in if you're disagreeing with that.
No, I would agree, but we don't know what the new 1802 compliant radio will be. Will that be non-incentive? Will that be intrinsically safe? I don't know what that rating is going to be, but currently, yes. I just want to make sure that we get the terminology correct. 8,000 radios are non-incentive. 7,000s are intrinsically safe. APX Next are non-incentive. So I think that's the new normal, is that non-incentive.
Right, which is not quite the same level of protection as intrinsically safe, but it's a relatively safe radio, and you've got to just educate people as to what it'll do and not do. That's, I think, where we're at.
So the other side to it, I'm assuming the fire world, and you had a question. We're stepping over you.
No,
Okay. So
I'll jump in.
in the law enforcement world, our goal is to have the equipment be transferable. So in the event of something happening in the field, I needed a battery or I needed something, I could take a radio from person A or a battery and put them to person B. So having the same style, the same model is ultimately important for the first line people. And I assume for the fire world, it's exactly the same.
Yes.
So as long as the battery is the same, right? So kind of going into the 8,000, would you change that out? Would you trade that? Would you move it around to administrate potentially? That may be the common or that may be a logical decision to make, right? But down the line, yeah, they're buying the radio, but obviously there's a reason that they're buying. So there's something there, and not waiting with you guys till the standard is devised. So I don't know what it is.
So the standard is devised. They just have the labs.
Yeah,
that
so
service
that's the
it.
test.
I just had a quick question for John Lozar. Hey, John, so the next, is it true that because that's LTE, that's the only radio that you could theoretically sit at your desk, change a code plug and send that code plug out over LTE and change the radios that are affected by that code plug? So in a sense, you're programming those radios from your desk.
Yes, over LTE. The 8,000s, though, have Wi-Fi. So if you hooked up to your local Wi-Fi network in your station, we could do the same thing as well.
So I thought the next had Wi-Fi also.
That is correct.
So, yeah, so this change, so essentially, whatever radio you pick that's available now from, other than a 6,000, I don't know about the 4,000s, but you're limiting the work that going out and having to physically touch to calibration for frequency alignment and then mobiles, which apparently is going to keep them busy because they have like 400 more. But,
You got it
but
anyway.
yeah, I mean, so there are Grundy County and a couple of other Starcom users that have purchased the Wi-Fi and they said it works great. So with Radio Manager, it's going to make updates and the touch issue a lot simpler.
We've noticed with the body cam videos and LTE, it is not a rapid upgrade or an upload. It takes a long time, even for a small video, to upload over LTE. That's
But
the
with
only
Wi-Fi,
warning.
everybody's got a mesh network in their buildings and stuff. So being able to do radios is going to be, well, they're sitting there.
So Linda, going back to my question, just to summarize, and I agree with your direction. All these sort of ancillary uses, we're assuming that those are going to be sort of hand-me-down and repurpose radios of one form or another, details to be determined, so that when we do quantities, and this question I asked in the comments on the report, I put it together, the comments changes the report. What quantities are we putting in? The total number of new radios or the total number of radios in service? And I guess what we said about mobiles, now we're getting to the point where the total number of radios in service, excluding these ancillary uses, are all going to be new radios. Is that where we're at?
Yeah.
I mean, in the end, what the board's going to need are total numbers. So it doesn't matter if it's here today. If you had 10 firefighters and now you have 15, you need 15. It doesn't matter if they have a radio or not, is what I'm hearing, because this is what we're replacing. Then the CSOs and anybody not in that category of first responder, of those smarter than us, statutorily, is, so we should have a total of those, because the question would be, do we have enough? We probably do on the 7,000s on that, people not going into fires. The question would be on part-time and things like that. On the fire side, how many more you need?
Good, Jim.
Probably clear as mud to me. So let me just do it one more time. If I'm answering the question for fire, and let's just assume we were doing, make it simple, one per firefighter, I would show one of those for every firefighter, because every firefighter would be getting a new radio, and I would discount anybody that was fire prevention, EMA, or any ancillary use, wouldn't put them in that total. And for mobiles, I would put in the one mobile for every known fire vehicle in service, because we're talking about replacing all of them. Is that the number you're looking for?
That's the way I understood it. That's the way I heard it.
Yep.
Okay, I just make sure.
I mean, the only question I have on the fire side are all those ancillary people, assuming they don't need a ruggedized radio.
I think that's a pretty fair assumption. Or, we could look at it. There might be, maybe some fire investigator, but I mean, generally we're keeping them out of hazardous atmospheres. I don't see a Chief Dynamite jump in, but I don't see a huge need for.
Yeah, I can't speak for other agencies, but our fire inspectors don't need a rub batch.
Correct. Yeah, I agree.
Do they need an intrinsically safe radio?
They don't. They go and they do fire inspections. They need a radio. They do fire inspections. They call in alarms. They'll come out, assist at a scene, but they don't do any active firefighting.
So should they retain 7,000 XEs until we can't use them anymore? Should they get the 8,000s that are in service today? That's the question.
I think either one could probably work. And again, there might be a rare exception of, in fire investigator that's in a basement somewhere, but I just don't see, much exposure by the time they're doing their work. The scene's been pretty well secured and safe. It's,
Yeah, they can utilize radios that we have today.
Interesting fire with the black radios, with the regular 7000s.
That's what I have.
Is what? Why?
I just have a
Just because-
7,000 radio.
You do. So you have just a regular one.
I shouldn't have a regular. I should have the.
Right.
There are some black XCs in service.
Oh, okay. Maybe.
Mine's not, that I know of.
Yeah, there were a couple, we tried to keep all the fire in that fashionably green color because it just makes it easier to know which is which.
Mhm.
But there were a few bosses that didn't want green radios. So there are a couple of XCs out there that are just black.
But I guess to the digging down just a little bit, in the event that, let's say these next radios are there and we have this group of replaced radios for periods of time until we get our budget numbers underneath us, those radios could be filtered out and utilized by those. And I'm going to use the word non-essential. I don't mean that it's being factual, but non-first line firefighter.
Yeah, not,
Is that right?
yeah, I guess,
Just like for CSO or for
Yes.
records or for whatever, they're not a frontline worker or a first responder.
We'll use the
I
legacy.
hate to use that word too. They're not that
Yeah.
frontline person. So we could use that, like I said, until our budget numbers come under. And once that comes under, then we'll have a little bit more stabilization here.
well, and then over time, it's easier to replace 10 or 12 a year
Right.
than, this whole big roll.
4,000, 5,000.
And well, and we'll probably be able to do it without agencies having to pay for it, which is where I'm trying to get to.
We are too.
Yeah, working on it. Can only do what it can only do.
Okay, so we beat this issue to death. I think we know where we're gonna go.
I'll reach out to Chief Homer and we'll identify those vehicles by type of radio, to Chief Conley's point, but the type of radio, VHF versus StarCom, and then what vehicle they're in. What type of vehicle, not what vehicle, but what type of vehicle, and we'll have that soon.
And
We
then
got
we'll
the last
limit it
response.
to a command vehicle, supervisor vehicle.
Well, I think that's the decision, but I would think that command supervisor is where you want it to be. But let's break that down and see where we're at with it. And we've taken most of the VHF radios out of our cars, or they turn them off because they've got it on the portable. So a lot of the frontline, they don't use the VHF anyway, so.
Well, and my concern is, I think from a ETSB perspective, providing a mobile on the police side for command vehicles is one thing, but if you were to continue for these agencies that are one vehicle
Yep.
for every vehicle, I don't think we can afford, nor should we consider going that level on the police side. And so we probably have to pare down those agencies. If they want to buy them, they could, but that's, when you start looking at other agencies, it's, sheriff's got 120 vehicles and 20 mobiles. If you go, you're going from 125 or less to in squads to 800 and some vehicles, that we're getting $30 million.
Right.
Which
Okay, so we'll have our
impacts my
numbers
budget.
for
I
July
ain't got
26th.
that in my purse.
Well, I would hope so, yeah.
Okay,
They were really good at coming back with the initial numbers. This will be a little bit more complicated because I want to make sure that a radio is a radio and what type of vehicle it's in. So we're going to ask two different questions. And that may take a little bit of time because they may not know it at their level. I may know how many radios, but I may not know how many StarCom radios versus VHF radio.
And that's a good point.
all right.
Well, because the sheriff may have 800 radios only because they have 800 backup channel early on.
Right.
So, but they also have VHF, so I don't know what they have
We'll find out.
in there.
Can I ask a question? We sent a rate or survey out on June 21st. How many people, and how specific to portable radios? Previously, before I was on the PAC, there was a survey sent out that requested how many mobile radios. Do you still have that information? Is that what we're using for fire mobile radio replacements? That survey?
I believe that's, well, I would ask Jim, but I believe that's true. I didn't.
Yeah, yes is the answer to the question. We have the data. It's just a bit of a math problem to get to the final answer because the way we asked the question was based off of using existing quantities as the base number. So to get, let's say if you ask me how many mobile radios do we need in total, I've got to get the survey, sorry, what do you call it? The alias database that John just gave me last week and total up the numbers off of those by department and then add to it the number of additional they needed. So we have the answer, just a math problem to get to the final answer. We have the data.
Very good, thank you.
We're good?
Yes, thank
All right. And we have the models, so we'll be ready for an August report.
I'll write a quick note for you for Wednesday.
What's our target date, Linda, given the board meeting in August?
Board is August 11th.
The board is August 11th. When's your next meeting here?
26th.
you.
That has to be in person, by the way.
Okay.
For voting members, only because that's when the governor's changing their rules. So I think you keep working on it. Can you have draft, there's still some holes in the report. You can add and any changes, any actual dialogue you want to put in there, content, we can combine all of that together and get it out to you. And then, because you want to have that pretty well, at least a preliminary. Yes, ma'am.
Our next meeting after the 26th is August 2nd because of just how the weeks fall with the holiday this month. So we do have that meeting as well if we need to.
Here. Okay. Okay. So you have two meetings before the next ETSB meeting and that fall within a comfort zone for you to post the board packet if we're going to post a report, which you probably should given the size of this purchase.
Well, I'm assuming on the 26th meeting, we're going to have a lot more questions that we're going to want to have an answer in that next week.
Yeah.
So having that quick turnaround is probably good, but to have the data on the 26th is probably important, just because I think that we'll have questions that will need clarification.
Agreed.
So that's our target, July 26th, to have our numbers and all that put together, correct?
Well, before that would be handy so that we could.
Oh, Linda, come on. I work better under pressure.
Well, then you're great. So, here's Brandon.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on then to item number 8, which is old business. I don't have any. Does anyone else have old business? Item 9, new business. I think we covered it.
Item, a quick comment, just
Oh,
on
sure.
the Woodridge tornado, Naperville, Woodridge, Darien. The radio system was flawless.
Yeah.
I have to say, I listened to it. I was very unfortunate. I was fortunate that I wasn't involved in it, but I was only about a block or 2 blocks away from it. But the system itself seemed flawless. It seems rock solid. Kudos to everybody, John and everybody that put together, and Linda. It has, that's what it's for.
Yeah.
And it really, really worked well. So but even police and fire, I don't know if there's any things, but just a handful of bunks out of the system, 17,000 pushes. Only a handful of bunks was pretty good. So kudos to you guys.
Operator error. Impatient clickers.
Could have been very, very well could have been.
Impatient
Yeah,
clickers.
and I actually had a unique perspective because we had companies in Naperville and in Woodridge. So I was monitoring both through Fire Ops 4 and Naperville's fire ground champ through the patch. Both worked flawlessly.
That's supposed to be. Yeah,
That's nice.
yeah, it worked out really well. So.
Thank you.
Only took us 12 years.
And in 12 more, it'll even be better.
It'll just be a chip in your
Item 10. Our next meeting is Monday, July 26th, and it must be in person.
Yes.
So I'm on vacation. John Lozar, is Matt Barman going to be back?
Yes, he'll be back on the 20th, so he'll make that meeting.
All right. Dave Shar, you on?
No.
Yes, I am sorry. I was having trouble getting to my unmute.
All right, are you gonna be available for an in-person meeting? on the
Yes, I will be.
Okay, who else do we have? And,
I will be in Florida. This is Joel from Wooddale.
Steve? There.
You're not here.
All right, so
It's
one,
not
two-
that, we only have a chair, we don't have a vice chair, so
Right.
I need somebody to
Yeah.
call a meeting to order.
Yeah, that's exactly.
But you're gonna have two missing, so you have four, so you have quorum, right? So you could, oh God, Bruckner's gonna have a heart attack.
Can you just make a chair like pro tem for the one meeting?
Could, vote to vice chair would be simpler, but yeah.
Okay.
Don't make eye contact quickly.
Who's listening to that? Dave Shar, you around?
Well, he's not a voting member.
Yeah, I'm not a voting member of this
That's a
particular group.
voting member. So these two guys heard Brandon.
Yes, I'm available.
Okay,
We're done.
all right, so then,
Steadies.
and then I will just make sure I've got like. We'll talk to
Okay.
Bruckner to make sure we cover everything, so he's not having a heart attack.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And then, item 11 is adjournment. Thank you.
Second, final.
All right, Heron,
Yes.
heard. Thumbs up's good.
Yes.
Joel,
Yes.
Barman, Dinah,
Yes.
Aiden,
Yes,
adjourned at 9:59.
thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good one.
See y'all.
Let us know when we're not recording.